scent grows richer. He knows he must be near. He finds a long passageway lit by chandelier.
To try and keep everybody happy, there would be parts of it where, we'd be discussing lyrics and throwing some of the words around for different bits. And so the Lamia, which was so Tony's musical piece, or Supernatural, Anaesthetist was Steve had brought in. So then, they would discuss some of the lyrical stuff with me because they'd sort of got the writer's ticket. But, I was pretty anal about hanging on to some lyrical flow through and, being able to put a stamp on it. I really wanted a sort of tougher edge to this record than we'd had previously. And I didn't think there was anyone else in the band that was going to deliver that.
Struck by beauty, gripped in fright. 3 vermilion snakes of female face, the smallest motion filled with grace.
I think the sound on the Lamb is better. It was slightly more like they were recording us live. I said earlier that we always felt like the live sound was good, and on record it was a bit of a struggle to get it back good enough as it was in the room. We recorded in a room, and I think that made it feel, the drums had more of a live feel, and I think that the sound improved a lot. I mean, there's some good sound on this album, I think, because of the idea of not being in a studio, being in a live room, and sort of miking that more like we're sort of playing together on stage. So I think the sound was quite an improvement for us, yeah.
Some of those tracks sound even a bit like Neil Young, the kind of the barn recordings of Neil Young with Crazy Horse, you can. It's just, it has that kind of, not a studio, not soundproof, but very woody quality. So,
coming back to it and doing the remixes and everything, what's actually on the tapes is really good, and to be honest, the original mix isn't bad either, I don't think, on this album. There's less change on this than, say, on the previous records, which is quite a bit of changing going on. I mean, still do a lot with it, a lot of moments you can really have fun with. And, things like with the 5.1, you can sort of, the different characters, like on Slippermen, sort of voices out the back and things, which is quite nice. So there's disconcerting things like that happening. So we tried quite hard to make it a sort of interesting 5.1 mix as well as the new stereo. So it works pretty well.
Rock face moves to press my skin. White liquid turns sour within. Turn fast, turn sour.
It was a dark time, I think, and so it felt as if we were sort of still living that dream of isolating ourselves and being in a sort of supposedly nurturing creative environment, but it wasn't working on lots of different levels yet. I think still some of our best material of the period when I was there in The Lamb Lies Down, and that's still one of the things looking back that I feel proud of. So there is, I think, quite often this irony when you get really shitty things going on in life, and yet the creativity that comes out of it can still be strong, interesting, and move people.
We just had more space on this album because it's a double album. I know it sounds very simple to say it, but that meant you could actually breathe a bit, not rush from section to section. And of course we took it live, and played America, before the album was out. So we're playing the whole show, a new album that's not out, concept double album. And thinking about it, it was madness really, but actually it went down okay.
In terms of songs, I always think of The Lamb Lies Down itself being the sort of last song that Peter and I kind of ever wrote together, because we'd written a lot in the early days together and things. And it was a pretty good song to end on, really. But the rest of the album, sort of, as I said, it was kind of, I don't know what it is, something about it. I think the lyrics, although they're good lyrics, but it means that no song really kind of stands out on its own. What could have been, say, some really pretty song like the Lamia, for example. I mean, if you start singing that out of context, it makes no sense at all. You sort of talk about snakes and stuff. So I slightly resent that aspect of it, I suppose. And the one we obviously, there's two songs we perform quite often out of context from that, which one is In the Cage, which sort of almost works, although the Brother John bit in the middle lyrically doesn't make much sense, but I think it's a really strong piece of music, so it all stands up. And then the other one's The Carpet Crawlers, which works because it's got a chorus that kind of could relate to anything. I mean, the verse lyrics are pretty strange if you listen to them, but they're some lovely imagery in there as well, so I think that works well out of context.
It's not a record company album, that. You know, the record company will come and say, what the fuck is that on there? You've got to get rid of that. There's no singing on that. Get rid of that. You know, so and that was what was wonderful about Stratton Smith. And, you know, he would just try to deal with whatever we gave him. And Atlantic did their best like that too, because Ahmet was a big music person, and, you know, he probably didn't understand anything about The Lamb Lies Down at all. It's just that he could see that it was something adventurous, and he just kind of crossed his fingers and hoped that we weren't mad, you know.
The carpet crawlers, he dare call us. We gotta get him to get out.
Well, Carpet Crawlers, it's difficult to know really. When we wrote it, we had a couple of moments in the story that Peter had some action, which we didn't have any music for. So we sort of were sitting in the room, and Mike and I just sort of started just doodling, you know, and played this very simple chord sequence to develop this idea, just the thing. And you know, so that we said, well, there you go, there's a basis. And then Pete wrote this thing on top of it.
And of the melody of that track, because I worked my arse off on that. It was actually, I was staying mainly with at Jill's parents' place, which was in Kensington, and there was an old out-of-tune piano, but I spent hours and hours honing that melody in, and then the lyric.
It just worked really well. It's one of those things, very simple, you know, and I think that's half its charm. Sometimes with Genesis it's a bit overworked and we sort of put too much into things, and something like this, which is, you know, almost a sort of bog standard sort of chord sequence in a way. Well, the chorus is a little bit different, but it just gave it somewhere to go. And I think I don't know why. You know, what is it? It's got it. I think the sort of the fact the song slowly crescendos, you know, and it kind of just sort of creeps into you like that. It's got a very strong chorus hook as well, I think, which is why I think why audiences like it. I don't know really. It shines out a little bit from the album in terms of its sort of its solidity and confidence, I think, because the other songs I say are all a bit more meandering, and you think there's one very sort of bright spark in the middle of the album like this, which at the time we wrote it, we had no idea that it was going to be picked out like that. You know, we played the album to people, and we thought that probably the single would, if there was going to be a single, it would be Counting Out Time. And everyone said no, the Carpet Crawlers is the one. You know, we released the single, of course, it wasn't a hit or anything, but we've tried again. We tried a couple of times since then, releasing it, and it's still never done anything.
Early morning, man had on ocean winds blow on the land. Movie palaces now undone.
I think the title track, you know, the opening track, I think is great. The piano riff, and Pete sets up the image, describing the New York scenes, you know. Early morning skyline, those sort of lines, you know, I think they really paint a picture of the album.
Rise down on Broadway, on Broadway.
I remember it. We were really pushed to get the album finished, and we were at Island Studios. And by this point, we had a day shift and a night shift, and I was on the night shift with Peter, I think. And the day shift was Tony and Mike and Steve. And we did a mix of it, me and Pete, and then the other guys came in and thought we were mad and changed everything. And there was a bit of friction there, I remember. But we were just trying to get it finished and try and get it out.
I'm counting out time. Got the whole thing down by numbers. All those numbers give me guidance.
Well, I think Counting Out Time is played because it's a pop song, you know, in the way that some of the others ones are. It's that was a song of Pete's, actually, Counting Out Time, entirely, which I think is a good little song. I mean, it works very nicely, you know. I think it's it's good in context of the album again because it's simpler compared with a lot of the other things.
I think Counting Out Time was the nearest thing to a single on the album, but it was a trifle risque.
It's all about early sexual experiences, trying to do it by the book.
Possibly not as strong as it could be musically. I think you need a bit more of a hook than just da 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 da, you know.
And I love Back in New York City. That was just a weird track. I mean, it was just out there, so heavy for us.
Back in New York City.
I think I wrote it with the band. I can't remember actually, but I think it was sort of, and a lot of jamming, a lot of improvising. And I know I was conscious at the time. We were thinking that it's kind of a shame when Pete wanted to move on because we thought this is sounding really good musically, very strong. And I think at the end it's still a strong piece.
That started off as a riff of Mike's. He just had this idea of playing. He had a 6-string bass and he was playing this riff on it, and then we sort of developed that as a song. And then Pete just did this sort of shouting type vocal on it, which was kind of at the time was sort of quite surprising, you know. But I think it works pretty well. Again, I think the song is a bit more complicated than it needs to be. I think there's a couple of little extra bits in the middle there that should probably, courtesy of me, in fact, I think, which probably be better off if they weren't there. But they are there, so that's what you've got.
People have covered it. I mean, Back in New York City has been covered by a couple of different bands recently that I've got. You know, I managed to get hold of these things when I hear about them. But yeah, I mean, just from my point of view as a player, I mean, I was playing. I mean, I went to see the Musical Box play this in its entirety, and I was amazed at just how complicated it was. And this guy was playing it well, but I mean, I must have played it better. You know what I mean? Because I wrote it, and I mean, my drum set was like, you know, like huge. I mean, it wasn't like a big drum kit. It was just like lots of noises here, lots of things there, and I was whizzing around it. I mean, it was probably the height. I mean, certainly between that and then the next 3 or 4 years with Brand X and Genesis, that was probably the height of my playing, you know. But a lot of inventive stuff, you know, from everybody. I mean, Steve was, you know, like a great sound guy, and, you know, Tony was getting the maximum out of what he had. You know, we were onto the double neck kind of thing with the guitar and bass. And it seemed to be a very, you know, a surge forward, really. Well, I just think that they display a side of Genesis that no one really, well, everyone forgets, apart from the ardent fan, that they forget or they've never heard. And I think it's actually the way we start writing now, by doing things like that. That's how I Can't Dance started. That's how No Son of Mine started. That's how all these songs. That's how we used to write. You know, we just would start playing, and our brief on the Waiting Room, for example, was the mood we want is darkness to light. And I remember I had this. I think it's out there as a bootleg. I don't know how, because I had the only cassette. But I used to cassette everything. I was the keeper of the tapes. You know, I'm still the writer of the minutes of the meetings. You know, but we started making noises. Steve with his darkness and lots of rain sticks and eerie noises, and suddenly, you know, Tony would start playing these chords, and I went drum, 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 and literally it was pouring rain outside, and we kind of, Tony put some chords in, and suddenly it started changing rhythm from dum 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 dum, and there was a rainbow, and it stopped raining, and the sun came out. I mean, it's most cosmic thing, you know. I mean, nothing. I just only report the news. I don't make it. I was there, and it happened, and it was the most amazing thing, and it kind of, it was just a little golden 8 or 9 minute moment, and that's what we. Those are the bits that I remember, and I think it would be good if people kind of remembered that side of it. That's the same band, like Silent Sorrow and Empty Boats, which is like, you know, sailing ships, you know, clouds, and fog. The same band that plays Hold On My Heart. The same band that plays the songs that they say we've sold out to. It's the same band, you know, it's the same mentality.